Well, good afternoon and welcome. My name is Bruce Gordon. I'm with the Department of Public Safety. Thank you for joining us here today. And to those of you watching online across the state of Minnesota, thank you for tuning in. We're here to kick off our extra DWI enforcement campaign with a very, very powerful message from a mother whose family was forever changed by a drunk driver on a November afternoon just 9 months ago. Erica Bodell and her 3-year-old daughter, Havana, spent several months here at Gillette Children's Specialty Healthcare recovering from life-changing injuries. We want to thank Gillette to begin with for hosting us today and being part of this very important message. I also want to thank Sergeant Wade Book and Chief Deputy Lisa Leverine with the Isanti County Sheriff's Department for joining us today. Sergeant Book was on the scene of this horrific crash in November of last year, and he performed CPR on Havana. Nearly 1 out of every 4 deaths on Minnesota highways are caused by drunk drivers, and they are totally and completely preventable. Erica knows that all too well, and you'll be hearing from her today in just a moment about the crash that injured her daughter, Havana, and Erica's 2 sons. I also want to welcome Jason, her husband, here today as well. You'll also be hearing from one of Havana's doctors, Angela Sinner, who is a Gillette Children's Specialty Healthcare Pediatric Rehabilitation Medicine Specialist. Colonel Matt Langer, the chief of the Minnesota State Patrol, will talk about the efforts of law enforcement in cracking down on drunk driving. And we're going to begin with Donna Berger, the director of the Office of Traffic Safety at the Department of Public Safety, to discuss the extra enforcement campaign that begins tomorrow around the state of Minnesota. Donna?
Thank you, Bruce. Good afternoon, everyone. People are dying and lives are being changed forever. I wish for a day when I will no longer have to look over and see a tragic result of a drunk driving crash. Everyone should be troubled when someone decides to get behind the wheel after having too much to drink. These types of tragedies just don't need to happen. To continue the efforts of educating the public and taking drunk drivers off the road, more than 300 law enforcement agencies around the state will be conducting extra DWI patrols. This will start tomorrow and go on through the Labor Day holiday. This includes officers, deputies, and troopers who will all be using overtime funding that is provided by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. 95 people in Minnesota were killed in 2015 by drunk drivers. If you think about this, school's going to be starting. That would be a classroom of 4 classrooms of children. Or perhaps in your office setting, it would be wiping off your entire office staff. But it's not just the lives lost. It's also the lives that are dramatically changed, like 3-year-old Havana, who's here with us today, along with her mother and father. Each year, an average of 253 people have life-changing injuries that are a result of an alcohol-related crash. Today, we're very fortunate to have Havana and Erica, her mom, to tell us their story, a story taking place that I say way too often here in Minnesota. If you do just one thing today, please share Erica's story. It could save your life and the life of someone you love. Thank you. Erica?
Thank you. I'm here today feeling very fortunate that my children and myself are still alive. We could have all easily died that day. Every day we have to deal with the feelings of sadness, anger, and frustration on how someone else's choice to drink and drive changed our lives forever. My husband is here to help support us. And Havana is here with me today. Our boys are in school. Prior to the crash, Caleb, who was 10, Gabe was 6, and Havana was 3, were typical kids that loved to play and ride bikes, have adventures, and most of all, go bowling. The day of the crash started like any other. Jason came home from working third shift and went to bed. So I got the kids ready and took them out to lunch before we had headed to the Cub Scouting event at the bowling alley. We had a great day bowling. Gabe helped Havana and showed her that she could carry her own 6-pound ball. Gabe helped Havana and showed her that she could carry her own 6-pound ball from the ball return to the alley and push it all the way down to knock down pins. Once we were done bowling, we started our drive home. And approximately around 3:40 in the afternoon, sun still shining, we were hit by a drunk driver. One man made a choice with no regard for anyone else, which led to the crash on that day, which has forever changed my whole family's life. I broke both of my legs, my eye socket, and my nose. I was trapped in the car and unable to comfort my screaming children, my hurt and barely alive child. Caleb may have only fractured his hip, but his emotional scars he now has to live with are so large I don't have enough time to even discuss. Gabriel had a fractured skull, which caused brain and nerve damage to his eye, and lost 4 inches of his intestines. He had double vision for months, and he could barely make it through the day without getting sick to his stomach. Havana, she broke her neck at the C1 and C2 level. For most adults, that would have been instant death. But she didn't die, she lived. In the first month, she was a complete quadriplegic on a ventilator with tubes and wires all around her and a halo. Once she was transferred to Gillette, she was given the best possible rehab we could have never wished for, forcing her to move and stretch her limbs and teaching her she could still use her very tiny voice, even with being on a ventilator, and ask for help and tell people what she needed and interacted with the world so that her life was still worth living. Some of the struggles that you don't think about or hear about when someone tells their stories are that Havana had to live at Gillette for 3 months in the rehab unit. Now remember, I had 2 broken legs, and my husband had to eventually return to work. So that meant Havana, being an hour drive one way, had to stay in the hospital all by herself. I, as her mother, could not stay with her or comfort her or even hold her, or even just do the simple things like putting her to bed and kissing her goodnight to go to sleep. My boys eventually returned to school, and all of our family lives out of state. So some days we could only come and visit for maybe an hour, and then we had to say goodbye. And she would cry and beg and plead for us to just stay 5 more minutes. But we had to think about the boys as well. They returned to school and they were trying to do their homework either in the car or while we sat in the play area at the rehab unit, visiting their sister, not understanding why Havana still could not come home, why she could not do the things she could before. And most of all, asking, when will she get better? Something that none of us can answer. We still pray every day that she will continue to get better and that our children don't grow up with hate in their hearts so that they can live and enjoy life to the best possible. I, like many others, have never thought it was okay to drink and drive. The difference is being kind enough to think of someone other than yourself and having the courage to make the right choice, because it is a choice. As difficult it is for me to speak about this, it is important that everyone understand that this is something that should not have happened and does not need to happen ever again. And I just want to say thank you, Sergeant Book, behind me, for doing such a wonderful job. Otherwise, things may have been different, and Vanna may not be with us today. Thank you.
As a pediatric rehab medicine specialist, I see children who have sustained life-changing injuries from these types of accidents. Children may sustain severe spinal cord injuries, or they may sustain severe traumatic brain injuries. Patients and their families go through many months and even years of work to recover and regain function. Some patients come a long, long ways and get much stronger and have great return in function after a lot of work. Some patients are not also always so lucky. Regardless, the effects are life-changing, and a patient and their family is changed forever. Patients require assistance breathing a lot of times. They require assistance taking care of bowel and bladder. They require intense therapies to learn to move and use their arms and legs again. There's special equipment involved in going through that process that they have access to. These injuries can be challenging for the patient and family working on recovery, but certainly they're frustrating for all of us when the event could have been prevented. We continue to do the work that we do here, but we hope that we do less and less of it in these situations.
I'm Matt Langer, the Chief of the State Patrol, and I wanted to first thank Dr. Sinner for sharing your story, but more importantly, I wanted to thank Erica for having being so brave to stand here and emotionally tell the story for what you've been through. And the star of the show today, I think, is Havana, who's been incredibly brave since this crash happened and continues to be brave today, because I don't think that this is her idea of a good time to be in front of cameras. But I can speak for law enforcement. I can speak for officers, deputies, and troopers who work every single day to prevent tragedies like the one that impacted Erica, Havana, and their family. And I can tell you that absolutely nothing is more frustrating to us than when we show up at the scene of one of these crashes and we do everything we can to save lives and to prevent injuries and to prevent further harm and to hold people accountable. But nothing is more frustrating than the fact that crashes like this are just absolutely so preventable. One man's poor decision resulted in nearly tearing this family apart and having absolutely life-changing consequences for several people, including Havana. And the only way that I can categorize that, and I speak for law enforcement, is that it's just incredibly frustrating, because it's so simple to avoid these types of decisions. They all are a result of just really poor decision making. As you heard from Erica and her story, those of us that have kids, it probably resonated that her story wasn't unlike many days in our lives as families where we do things like go bowling and we try to get home safely. And that's exactly what they did, and they encountered a drunk driver in the middle of the day. So impaired driving is not a problem that affects just the overnight hours or 2 or 3 in the morning. It's not a bar rush problem. Impaired driving is literally a 24-hour-a-day problem in our state and on our roads. They don't just happen at bar close. In fact, every year, 27,000 drivers are arrested in Minnesota for DWI, and if you do the math, that's on average of 74 times a day. Those arrests for us are motivating because, to me, each one of those 27,000 drivers that's taken to jail is perhaps the one driver that was destined to do what was done to Havana to someone else. So those are opportunities for us to prevent these crashes. Law enforcement is incredibly passionate about getting these drivers off the roads and doing everything we can to prevent impaired drivers and then arrest impaired drivers for those that preventative efforts don't help. And as we enter the Labor Day period, the impaired driving season is not over. It goes all year for us. Labor Day is a time when people get together and they go to the cabin one last time, or they go fishing, or they're out and about, or they go bowling on a regular late summer or early fall afternoon. And we're out there, we're looking for impaired drivers. We're doing everything we can to find them. But rather than find them, we would rather not see them and not find them by people making good decisions. So we just urge people to really absorb what happened to Erica's family in Havana and really think about that as you're that person who maybe has a drink or has a beer and is now figuring out what to do. Our advice, our urge, our plea, our mandate for you is to just not drive after you've been drinking, to plan ahead, to call a cab, to use ride-sharing services, to sleep somewhere and not get behind the wheel. These tragedies are every single time preventable, and that the only thing we can do is just stress the importance of good decision-making and having a plan. And if you've had something to drink or you've had too much, please don't get behind the wheel. And if you don't listen to me, just look at Havana, and I hope that helps you make the decision.
All right, before we open it up to questions, just a note to media, we'll have the full news conference video posted on our YouTube page after this event. We'll also be emailing out or making available pictures, family pictures that the family has permitted us to share. We'll get that information out to you in an email advisory a little bit later on this afternoon. So right now, open it up for questions. Anybody like to begin? Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Adrian Rod is from CARE TV. Are we able to hear from this beautiful Havana?
Not,
No, she speaks with the voice.
just not today. She's really shy.
Okay. Mom, if you don't mind stepping back to the
Yeah.
podium. What message do you have for drunk drivers?
To think about someone other than themselves that day and to make the right choice, because it is a choice.
Erica, are there details you can share with us in terms of the driver who did this to you? How, where he was, why he was so drunk at 3:30 in the afternoon? How he crossed the line and came at you head on? What can you fill in some details there? And what happened to him?
Well, he was given the max sentence, and I'd rather not speak too much more. I'm
Perhaps,
sorry.
Someone else can.
Provide some additional details. Go ahead.
He was at a local bar and had been drinking there that day, and had left that bar, and he went around a curve, went off the road and came back and hit her. She was in the northbound lane, and he crossed over and hit her almost head on. So he was convicted. He pled guilty to criminal vehicular operation, and he is currently incarcerated.
Is there any remorse on his part?
We can't speak
can't.
for him.
What was his blood alcohol
What did I say? Do you remember?
We'll get that information out to you, no problem.
Do you remember, did you see him coming along? What do you remember of those moments?
Just in the instant before, I do remember that he was crossing over, and I knew the crash was about to happen.
But it was a split second.
It happened very quickly.
Sergeant, can you say anything about the scene that day, giving aid to young Havana? What goes through your mind when you come across a scene like this?
Any questions?
You just speak personally, just.
What's on your heart today, seeing Havana here and her
I
mom?
think it's great. I haven't seen them since the day of the crash, so this is one.
Sergeant Book found Havana in a car seat in the car, not breathing, and so he took her out of the car. Some passerbys had already taken her sons out of the car and were tending to them, so Sergeant Book could get Havana to the ambulance right away and get her out of the scene immediately, and then started working on Mom to get her out because she was trapped in the vehicle.
Was Havana in the back seat or front seat?
She was in the back seat in a car seat.
You said she was 3. Has she had a birthday since then?
Not until next month,
What day is her birthday?
September 13th.
Colonel Langer, you spoke of this just briefly, but I would imagine other law enforcement share your opinion. When you come upon an accident scene with such devastation, and we've seen this family just torn apart, there would be so much anger, and I would feel so much anger that this was senseless, needless, and caused by somebody's irresponsible actions, drinking and driving. Is that the point you're trying to get across? One of the points you're trying to get across?
Well, I think anger is an emotion that we all feel when we see things like this, regardless of whether you wear a uniform or not. At the time of the crash, and I can speak for Sergeant Book because anyone in law enforcement has been part of something like this in some way, shape, or form, there's not time for anger. There's only time for doing what we're trained to do and doing what Minnesotans would do, and is just helping people the best that we possibly can. And I think his actions definitely made a difference for Havana and their family. And so certainly anger and frustration don't creep in until later. But I think frustration is the best descriptor in terms of emotion, because we work so hard to prevent these types of tragedies. And we know the consequences of drinking and driving. We see it all the time. And yet we continue to relive the nightmare from people not heeding our advice and just making good decisions. There's so many options available. It doesn't matter where you live in Minnesota. There's so many options available to you to get home without driving after you've been drinking, that that's just our plea, that people just take advantage of those options and just plan ahead. Because I can't speak for the man that did this. I think very few people would drink and then plan to do this. And yet it happens all the time. So anyone that thinks it's not going to happen to them is just living in dreamland.
Any other questions?
Do you mind, just so we have it spelled correctly, can you spell your names for us?
Sure.
We have those on the advisory. We have some extra advisories we can hand out with correct name spelling.
I just always like to double check.
Sure. My name being Erica Bodell, E-R-I-C-A. Our last name is B-O-D-E-L-L. And Havana's name is spelled H-A-V-A-N-A.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. And again, we'll send out that email with some additional resources for you. Okay. Thank you.
And a quick note to the media, they have, this is the rehab area, obviously, so they have patients coming in, and for their privacy, obviously, we could gather up and get out as quickly as possible. So I go up to from July, they have other patients coming in, so if we don't mind doing that. And then the pictures that you'll see some pictures with the crash scene. You'll see some photos from the hospital, and the one photo you'll see from Havana, which is her bowling, happened that day, right before the crash. I would encourage you to talk to the law enforcement. Isanti County investigative.
you guys want to go out, drive out and do a couple things, that's fine. We've got a little bit of time.
Can you take your brakes off for me? Thank you.
I honestly, I can't spell it. It's in the background. Yeah. Yes. I don't think they're working. I don't think they're working. What's that? Wait. Yep. I think it's criminal particular. Or, it was injury, so. Right. Him and his passenger. He was driving a big truck, yeah, she was driving a truck.
Thank you.
Yeah. We're gonna go, keep doing our job.